Welcome to the Other Side Pod. I'm Nadine. We're not experts. We're just humans having a human experience we think you can learn from, or relate to, or laugh at, or cry over. So hit download, dive in, and hear how folks found themselves on the other side. We're recording. Sweet. What in the world do you like about high rocks?
Honestly, it's hard. It's really hard, but it's also like, first of all the exercises you can totally do. There's no like trick to them. There's no like swimming where you need technique or whatever, but you get to just put your head down and grind. And you can start off slow, because I often start off slow, but like when it kicks in at like 45 minutes, you're like, oh my God, I can still keep going.
Right.
And it's,
I
it's,
love that you're like when it kicks in at 45 minutes. Jen, you are like a special superhuman human. Okay, introduce yourself.
okay. So I'm Jen White, friend of Nadine. So I am a lawyer. I am an employment lawyer by trade. I have three awesome kids, 21, 19, and 17-ish, married. Live in Ottawa. And yeah, I love sports. Oh, have always done a ton of sports, grew up with sports, and I work in sport now. So that's sort of the full circle of who I am.
I met you through sport, through movement. You were doing spinning classes at a studio I had. And I told the group one day that I was going to run a half Ironman. And after class, you stopped me and you were like, I'm going to help you. And I didn't know you very well other than knowing who you were and as a rider at the studio. But true to your word, you sat me down at the bridgehead next door pretty soon thereafter, and you took me through your training plan and you set me up with mine, and you would check in with me. And then I started training, I think it was in the winter, and I think the half Ironman was in, when is the one in
June, I
Muskoka?
think it's June, like
June.
mid-June, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And around April, I hit a wall and I was like, I quit. And I didn't do anything for a month.
Right.
And I told you, and you said, you're still going to run it though. And I'm like, no, Jen, I haven't done anything in a month. And you just helped me realize like I put a lot of work in, and I did really love moving my body. I wasn't in it to try to win or try to get to Kona, right? Kona's where the big world. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what I could push my body to do. And I credit you, and I don't know if I've ever told you, to doing that. Like you really did hold my hand, even though you weren't there day of race. Like you weren't there every
Yeah.
training swim and all that, but you were always with me. So
Oh, that's
thank
so
you.
kind. Yeah, I
Oh,
remember doing a spin class, and then we'd go for like a 5K loop, because
yeah.
we needed to get ready for that brick, right? When you get off on the run, you need to know what it feels like, because it feels awful for 20 minutes. So like a 30-minute run is perfect because you get 20 minutes of awful, and then at the 20-minute mark you're like, "Oh, okay, I can do this." So, no,
Yeah,
that's
I wouldn't have known to do that. And now that you do high rocks with your daughter, like you just did the competition in Toronto, right?
That's right. Yep, we did it. It was awesome. It's a really good transition from triathlon. It's shorter, less, less different things to prep for, and but equally as hyped and equally as fun. And I was super impressed by it. And it's fun. It's super fun to do it with a buddy, right? So
Yeah, of
you
course.
split the events. You can decide how to split them up. So of course my 19-year-old is wicked good at burpee broad jumps, right? So she can, go in, go until you can't go anymore, and then I'll step in and give you a break. But
Right.
it's really fun. I really, yeah, 100% would recommend it to anybody.
Ugh. We are here. I mean, I could talk to you about sport all day, every day, but we're actually here to talk about getting fired.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
flippin' fired. All right. When you were a little kid, what do you
Yeah.
want to be when you grow up?
So I wanted to work for foreign affairs. I wanted to be a diplomat. I love Canada. and my dad had worked for a development agency and represented Canada. And we went overseas for a number of stints. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in foreign affairs.
Is that what led you to law school?
I don't know. So it's funny because I have a daughter who's sort of deciding what to do right now. And so I've been thinking about this a lot. I went into law school because I love to write. I never thought of myself as like a courtroom advocate, but I did love to write. And so that I was thinking either law or journalism. And so when after I finished my undergrad and I just applied all over the map, those were the two things and got into law school.
Where? Where'd you go?
So I'm from out west, so I'm from Edmonton. I'd come to Ontario to do my undergrad, although I took a year and went and played rugby in Wales, and then finished up here, went back to Edmonton for a year, and then came back to Ontario to Ottawa U. I got accepted at a couple of different places, but I'd always had a really good time in Ottawa, mostly in the market and most, doing non-studious studious things. But I just had a really good vibe from Ottawa, so that's why I chose it. Everybody was like, "Oh, did you come here because of the Supreme Court or whatever?" And no, I just really liked, yeah, I liked the canal. I liked everything about Ottawa. So that's why I
Oh,
ended up here. And I have to say, it's part of my story, like I never thought I would stay here. I was always trying to hedge to go back to Alberta. I loved Alberta. And but then, here I am 30 years
yeah,
later.
sames.
And
Sames.
yeah, and now I can't imagine living in Alberta. Like I love the summers here. I love the lakes. So, yeah, this was definitely the right place for me.
Ottawa does that. Like when I left Newfoundland for Ottawa, I remember waving to my mom and dad, and I said, "Don't be sad. Pretend I'm going to do my master's. It's 2 years max." And that was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ottawa just, it's a nice place to land. And I never expected to not be constantly hedging my way back,
Right.
to
Yeah.
Newfoundland. Okay, let's get in. Tell me
Okay.
about that flippin' first time you got fired. Oh my God.
Yeah, so as per the headline, so I've been fired twice.
Okay.
And I want to preface this by saying like this was not these neither of the times were like layoffs or like downsizing or anything. Both of the instances were, Jennifer, we don't have any value for you anymore. So they were both, yeah, but they're a little bit different stories. So I'll go through each of them. So the first one, so I finished law school, started working, in a regular law job, and then I went to go work for one of my clients, which is very, that's what a lot of lawyers or accountants do. You go work for your client. So about, 3 years into the workforce, I went to go work for my client, and I worked there. It was this amazing company. It was an Ottawa-based company. It's fairly small, 1,000 employees. I was doing a lot of employment labor law, and the industry that this company was in was just fascinating. It was a really great success story. So I worked there for 9.5 years. And I have to tell you, like, I loved my job. I loved everything about it. I was, by the end, I was very, very close. Like, I was the legal advisor to the CEO, but I got to travel a lot. I got, really interesting issues in this company. And I just loved it. And in the meantime, so during that 9 years, I met my husband. We'd had 3 kids. We'd bought a house. And, anybody I would talk to, especially, people who'd gone to law school, I'd gone to law school with, who'd gone on a different path, I was always, always raving about this great job that I had. And so part of the story, which is fairly important, is that when I had my 3 kids during that time, so they were each 2 years apart, because I was working for a small company, I didn't take very much time off with my kids at all. So I had friends who were in the government, and that's when 1 year mat leave had just come in. But I was working private sector and, not getting topped up at all. So with my first daughter, I only taken 6 months off. With my second daughter, I'd taken only 5 weeks off. And with my son, I'd taken 5 months off. And I'd always, I talked to lots of girlfriends at the time, and I was fine with my decision for a couple of reasons. One, it just so happened that each time I went on mat leave, I was working on a very big project in the company, so I didn't want to hand that off to anybody. So I made that choice to come back each time completely willingly. The 5 weeks that my middle daughter, that was really tough, but it worked because I got to have continuation on this project. And I remember, dishing it out with my friends at the time. And I remember saying to one of them or many of them, like, I want to figure out in my career so that when my kids are in middle school, that's when I want to be home with them. Like when they're young, they're little, I was like, I mean, of course I love to be home with my babies, but I was always projecting like, okay, whatever happens, I'll be okay if I'm home with them in middle school.
Mm.
So chugging along in my career, and so when I had my son, part of the agreement with my husband when we found out I was pregnant was that we were going to get a nanny to help with childcare. And so my son was born in May, and we had brought over a nanny from the Philippines in September, and I went back to work in September. And so she was now living with us. And I went back to work. So I went back to work late September. The other interesting thing is that during during that mat leave, so in late August, the CEO of the company that I worked for had been let go by the board of directors. And so this was jarring to me because I he was a fabulous mentor. I had so much time for him. He gave me a lot of time. I was young, and he'd always hear me out on issues. And it was a really, it was a great boss relationship. So he'd been surprisingly let go. So I returned in the fall after my son was born. And what had happened was he'd been let go, and another senior person in the organization had been put into the president role. So I came back, and now I was advising somebody different. And this person, I had worked for him previously. He'd been there for the entirety of my 9 months. And there was always something that I used to be like, I just can't seem to communicate with him, or I'd leave meetings frustrated with him. And so now he was essentially my boss and
Wait for a sec. He was there, you were there 9 years up to this point, and he was there the same amount
yeah,
of time.
yeah, he
Right.
was there
Okay.
the same amount of time. We could just never get it, have a good conversation. Whereas the predecessor CEO, it was great, and I would say with almost everybody else in the organization, it went really well. So I come back, and now I'm reporting to him, and so for that fall, I was really struggling. Like I felt like I'd go into meetings, and he'd be second guessing any legal advice that I was giving him, and which is fine. Absolutely, I want people to challenge, but it was emotionally a bit of a roller coaster for me. And I kept thinking, like, what's going to happen here? Is it me? Maybe I'm just sad because I'm back at work or whatnot.
Mm.
Um,
Also, there's a way to challenge that's productive, and there's a way to challenge someone that's a bit demeaning, or I'm going to guess it wasn't the most productive of challenging,
sure,
or the way he went about it.
sure, for sure, for sure. And just very cautious. And then I remember, and I try and think about this because I don't, I want to believe I knew it at the time versus looking back at it retrospectively. But around December 15th was our company Christmas party. And I remember that day. I remember driving into the parking lot, and I was a little bit late, like probably 8:35 or something. And I saw this now president guy in the parking lot. And I remember my body just kind of like going jello. And
Mm.
I remember thinking, oh, I've got to make sure I don't get a parking spot next to his. I knew something was off. Anyways, ended up parking and then walking towards the building. And then he jumped out of his car right as I was going in, and he was perfectly fine. And in fact, so fine that he offered to drive me to the Christmas party at lunch. And so I remember being like, oh boy, like I've really read this wrong, right? I've really not, it's not as bad as I thought. I mean, he's asking me, to spend private time with me or whatever. So this is all good scene. So went to the Christmas party, it was fine. Went through Christmas, Christmas vacation, it was fine. And then flash forward, I was trying to look on the calendar today. It was either January 9th or January 10th. And so it was a Tuesday, and I was working late in the office. And I remember he called me in. He called me into his office. It was around 4:45 in the afternoon. And so I went to his office. That had happened a million times. And I sat down, and he pushed across the table a termination letter for me. And I was this part I can remember to a T. I can tell you exactly the artwork that was behind him as he was talking. I can remember the color of the envelope that it was in. And so he basically said, "Yeah, we're done." And it was one of those critical moments in your life where, every time stops or whatnot. So I probably talked to him for maybe 3, 4 minutes. I don't think I asked him why. I
He
remember
didn't tell you why? Like he
he didn't
didn't
tell me
offer
why.
why.
He didn't
He
he
literally just said, "Here's the letter. We're
You're done.
done."
You're done.
Really?
Yeah. And then he said, "So what I want you to do is I want you to go to your office right now and pack it up, and you're out. You're done." He said, "I'm not going to hover over you to see what you take from the office. I'm going to give you that space, but I want you out by the end of the day." So, so there was a couple of really interesting things in there. First of all, I, as the lawyer for the company, I'm the one who created the termination document, right? So as well as the like formula for what would be paid out. So I'm looking at my own document, right? And I had put in a rule about, terminations need to take place on a Tuesday, for example, because, you don't want to do it at the end of the week because it could be stressful for an employee. So all these things that I had created over those 9 years were sitting in this document in front of me. And another really, troubling part was I could tell from the letter who had written the letter because, I don't know if they still do this. I don't see it anymore, but when an admin assistant would write up a letter, they would put their own initials at the bottom. And I could tell who had written the letter, and it was actually written by, so as part of my job, we dealt with external lawyers, and I was the internal lawyers. The external lawyer was a very good friend of mine, and I'd known him since law school. And so I could tell from the letter that his admin assistant had written this letter for me. So that felt, I was like, what? So went back, went to my office, put together banker's boxes and took
Wait,
these.
did you before you left, did you say anything? Like what came out of your mouth?
I Nothing came out of my mouth. I figured I was probably holding it back, but I was like, I don't want to say anything stupid. I don't want to, I don't want to give him any leverage. That's it. That was the
Oh, so there's no back and forth at
no back and
all.
forth.
You
No back and forth.
you almost like processed it all in your head, looking at this letter, figuring out that your friend had already known you were getting fired,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is a pretty gutting
Yeah.
feeling, I'm sure. And then I guess I just picture you dumbfounded, pushing your chair back, holding the letter and walking kind of slowly away.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I
Jen.
probably, I probably stomped a bit away, to be honest, because I also knew, like, I knew enough about the process of getting terminated that I knew this wasn't the end of it.
Okay.
I knew that I would have to end up getting a lawyer, which I did, et cetera, et cetera. But I remember going back to my office, and at the time, so I don't even think this was 2009. So I don't even think I had my own home computer at that point. So I remember calling up my girlfriend who worked in IT at the time and being like, I have I have a folder on my computer with like personal stuff on it. How do I get how do I get it off? So she walked me through, how to download it onto a USB. So she was the first person I told. So my husband at the time was away and I also had to call the nanny who's been with us for a few months and be like, I don't know what time I'm coming home, just tell the kids I had to work late. So that yeah, so I packed up my 9 years of stuff into boxes, schlepped home. I had
Wait, what did that feel like? Packing up 9 years worth of stuff for a job you really loved.
it was awful. I can tell you, I have such a clear picture of walking out into the parking lot. There were some staff there because there was a 24-hour operation, but I can remember like it was, a movie because my car was underneath the light post and I had to walk out. And I'm sure I had to do multiple trips because, I decorated my office, right? I probably had these degrees sitting there. Um, anyways, that part, yeah, absolutely humbling, absolutely like what the heck. But
Were you crying or were
oh,
you holding it in?
oh, I'm sure I cried when I was calling my girlfriend to be like, how do we do this? How do we whatnot? But I made an absolute, like, I was not going to cry in front of him for sure. Um, and I do respect him for saying like, I'm not gonna hover over you because I've been involved in terminations where you have done that. You have to make sure that somebody doesn't, take anything.
Hmm.
So that was so went home devastated, had to kind of fake it with the nanny because I didn't want
Oh my God.
the nanny to know because she's thinking I've just come here to Canada and now the reason that I've come here, this woman's job, is not is no longer in existence. So
So okay, wait, pull in with your car. I like a detail.
yeah.
You pull in with your car, you know the nanny's in there, your husband's away, and you're like, I got it. What do? You give yourself a little like chat, like tap on the cheek, or
Well,
how do you?
actually, I pull up and my girlfriend, the partner of the woman who had helped me with the USB, was waiting on my doorstep. So she was standing
Mm,
there with a chai
that's
latte.
a
I remember
good
that. I
friend.
know, I know, they both are. And so so we kind of came in and we talked about it. But yeah, that night I just kind of went away, business as usual. Not business as usual, but like, okay, this is my new tomorrow, right? And so, but a couple of things in that. So I was actually off work for a full year,
Okay.
and which was fairly significant from the fact that, you know, I wasn't the primary, my husband was also employed, but I was a big part of that, our financials. So being off
Yeah.
for a year, I did have a package, right? So it did sustain me for a while. But what happened after that, so kind of coming up from the rising, one of the things, and I would recommend this to anybody who's in that situation, in those days there was an outplacement service in Ottawa. And this was a really neat organization. And because I'd done terminations for other employees, I I knew about this service. So this was absolutely part of my process. So that was a Tuesday. And by Monday of the following week, I had started at this outplacement service. So this ended up being a really, I'm not going to say fun, but it so you'd go to this place and they had a little cubicle for you. It was as if you were pretending to go to work there, right? So
Okay.
you'd go there in the morning, everybody else who had been through restructuring recently, like all over the city, were there with these little cubicles. And then you'd have these sessions during the day, like resume building, communication, how to basically reinvent yourself, all these things. And so you'd go to these seminars and then you'd go for lunch and then you'd come back and they'd have like a job search. So it was for people who, you know, had a routine of going to work every day. It was kind of this facade. And what had happened was the same week that I got fired, there was a big organization in Ottawa, and all of their senior executive had been fired as well. And so they were my cohorts. And these guys They were awesome. They were, I would say like early 50s, and I was, I was younger, but we just had a ball, and we would go to these seminars just to kind of say, we had somewhere to go, and then, we'd go out for lunch and then go back. And there was like a job board there, so there was always new jobs in Ottawa coming up. It was a miserable time for me personally, and I'll get a little
Mm.
bit into that, but it was, this going there every day to have a purpose absolutely was essential. And
Well, I didn't know something like that existed.
yeah,
So you get fired on a Tuesday, and by the following Monday, you're sitting at this out service or
yeah,
outsource. What do you call it? Sorry,
outplacement service. Yeah.
outplacement service. So you just knew this place existed.
Yeah, because it was often part of a package, and it completely made sense. And these were all like everybody who worked there was exceptional, and like, so used to having people in crisis. It was yeah. So, so I would get up and I'd go there, you know, and wind my day around 2 and then come home. It was probably for about 3 or 4 weeks. And interestingly enough, in my little group of with those guys, some of those guys hadn't told their spouses what had
Oh
happened.
my
So they
God. Yeah,
were,
and I want to hear how you told Chris, by the way. But okay.
yeah,
They were just going there pretending they were going to their regular jobs?
yeah, yeah. And so it was like, so they would give us daily updates about, who they told and what they told, what the storyline was. And yeah, another like really, really kind of impactful thing during this period. So my favorite song when I graduated from high school was Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. It was on like his Bad album. And I have such a clear recollection of driving down from my house down the parkway to this outplacement service, just cranking Man in the Mirror, like just on repeat over and over again. And it was just this like, it starts off really slow and then it comes up to this big crescendo, and it's like basically, you're the one who's going to make the change. And so that was
I
like
love
that
it.
was absolutely my song. So
Oh,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. So we're
So, yeah, sorry, go.
So worked. Yeah, so telling Chris was actually not. It wasn't. It was. Yeah. I mean, so Chris is. He's a small business owner. He's had lots of ups and downs in his career, and he was the perfect person, perfect support. Didn't
Really?
blame, didn't anything. Um, and it's funny though. So that period of time, as much as I talk about meeting those guys. So my biggest fear at that time was like, what am I going to say when, somebody who doesn't know asks me about work? And am I,
Oh,
that
yeah.
story of like, you don't know people that well. Like I pictured a neighbor or something. You don't know them well enough, but you're going to lead with, oh, I just lost my job or I got fired. And, partially because I raved about this job for so many years. Um, and I was also dealing with, this was the first time that the realization that those people at work that you see every day, that details about, that on Tuesday their kid has ballet lessons, their husband, all those details about them. I did not hear from anybody, anybody.
Oh my God, I'm shook for you.
Yeah.
Not
So
one of them?
not one of them. And over
Jen.
over the years slowly people came back, one or two, but that was such a realization for me, right? Like these are not your friends, even though you've been passing each other in the hallways for years and years and years. And that, people who'd thrown me baby showers, celebrated all that stuff. And then, obviously the next morning there was an announcement, and I was gone. But that was shocking to me.
Why do you think that happened that way? Like, why wouldn't
M-
they call
Maybe
you?
maybe they were afraid, right? It's that survival instinct, I suppose. But it
Mm.
really shook my ground because you do presume that those people that you spend time with are have your back. And
Mm-hmm.
that became very, very apparent to me. So it
That had
was,
to be a really awful feeling. Like if I picture you on that Wednesday morning, or maybe
yeah,
by Friday morning, because give them a few days to reach out. Number one, you don't have the job you had the Friday before. Number two, you have no reasoning for being fired. And number three, no one's reached out. I mean, thank goodness you had somewhere to go on Monday to hang out at the
yes, yeah, yeah,
cubicle.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have gotten out of bed.
No, yeah, and I remember it so clearly because it was Obama's inauguration the following week. And I remember leading up to this, I was so excited. That was a really good time, right?
Yeah.
He'd been elected in the fall and he was coming in. And I remember thinking, because I feel like it was the following Tuesday, maybe exactly a week later. And I remember saying, oh, I'm going to take the morning off to sit and watch this. And there I was sitting on my couch with my nanny and my three kids, you know, on downstairs watching it, probably, I don't know, it was pretty, it wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be for sure.
Wasn't the moment you had been picturing for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah. So, and I do remember, and actually I thought about pulling them up. So one of my like ways to get through things is I remember, I wanted to write down the entire story. So I wrote down the entire story, and just because I was like, I want to get it out. And, it's also being a lawyer, I know that those documents about what happened are important. And it was very, therapeutic for me to get the story out. But it was a really long year. And a couple of good things happened out of it. I did get some money for training. I went and did a course that I'd always wanted to do down in Colorado.
What course? What is
It's a
it?
mediation course. So
Ah,
yeah, and in Colorado is sort of like a really important place for mediation. It's one of the places where it started in the States, and it was like a retreat. So it was very earthy and like a really cool venue. Um, and I ended up doing a master's in law, not that year, but during that year I was like, okay, I don't know how long I'm going to be off. So I did sign up to do a master's, which ended up being fabulous. It took a couple of years to finish it, but it was really, really nice. So that was the first time.
how
Yeah.
old were the kids at this time?
So Pike would have my son would have been 5 months. So the
Ah,
it's
right.
because I'd
Jesus.
just gone back, and then 2 and 4. So I don't even know. I actually told them this week that I was going to do this podcast with you, and they remember the second time, but I don't know
Okay.
that they know the story of the first time.
So it's
Yeah.
not like you had to explain anything to them. What about the nanny? Whatever.
You don't I'd like to ask her, because I think I was so concerned about not wanting to upset her. Maybe she thought I worked upstairs. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
That's amazing.
But she
Right. You
ended,
wanted to make sure she felt that she
yeah,
still had employment.
yeah.
Right.
And she
Mm.
ended up staying with us for 9 years. So, I mean, it worked out remarkably. And she's an absolute big part of our family. But yeah, she
Oh,
was right there, right there.
oh my.
Yeah.
So you were in that year that you were off. Like, did you take any amount of time and not look for anything? I guess not, because like the week later you were
Outplacement.
at that outplacement. And while you were there, do you think you were actually actively looking for work, or were you kind of just probably digesting the experience that just happened to you?
Yeah, for sure. I was just digesting. And then, yeah, I just sort of killing time, I guess. And I can't like to think about now, like a full year. I mean, I remember at that point really wanting to get into the government because I was like, maybe this was a private sector thing. I had friends in the government who were, you know, this would never happen to. And so that process in and of itself takes a long time. So, that would have taken time to prepare and apply and whatnot. So, but there was enough to do. There
Three
was enough to
kids.
do for that time. Yeah.
Did do you think you had an opportunity to enjoy the kids in a way you didn't think you would have that experience at that age? Or
I
were you
wish
too distracted?
I
Because I
wish I could
mean,
tell you I
clearly.
did. I wish I could tell you, but I don't think I did. I remember there was a gymnastics class that was the middle of the afternoon that I got to take my 4-year-old to. And I was like, oh, see, I never would have got to do this. But, it wasn't, my identity was so wrapped up in my job at that time that yeah, it was too unexpected and it was too unplanned. So, so
Yeah, so there wasn't much, I'm going to take this opportunity to lay back and enjoy this moment. You were probably, what, like, who the fuck am I now? I cannot believe I went to school. I worked here for this long.
yeah,
And now you had no control over what happened, which is, that's a really scary experience.
yeah, it was scary. But so let me tell you about the second time. So,
Wait, I want to know one more thing.
yeah.
Did you call the old CEO and talk to him
Yes,
about this?
absolutely. Absolutely.
And what
And
did he
he was
say?
100% support. Like he was my guy. Like he was my hero. And so he was fabulous. He couldn't do anything. He was out. He'd also got, a much more awful, walkout than I had. Um
Right.
and so, we both sort of commiserated. I remember going for coffee with him a few times. But it was, yeah, I guess part of it was an acceptance that that era was over. So,
Yes.
yeah.
That's a big thing too. You just have to grieve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yeah, but I will say one part of this, and it's the same as both for both of the times it happened. I remember being like I said, so worried about what am I going to tell the neighbor? What am I going to tell, when I go to apply for another job and they ask how it ended, and I'd worked on this script about explaining it and blah blah blah. I can literally count on one finger the number of times in a professional setting where somebody has said, "What happened there?" to either times. And it was that,
Okay.
and that was really, really important to me because, you know, it happens all the time to people, but when you're going through it, you're like, "Oh my God, like I need a story for this that makes sense." But I've been asked once in a job interview and I skated through it and it was nothing. And it was like that was really pleasantly surprising to me. Yeah.
So if I came to you tomorrow, let's say I worked for, I don't know, Shopify,
Yeah.
and I'm like, Jen, I just got fired. What would be the one piece of advice you would give to me?
That's a good question. One piece of advice. Oh, my first thing would be my legal advice, and that is to sit down and document that story leading up to it. You may never need it, right, for any future, litigation or whatever, but it's also very therapeutic to lay it out and like, okay, here's my story. I'm going to tuck it away. And then it's done and it's, acceptance. I guess it's, that classic, I'm 55 now, so it's a 55-year-old talking to I was probably 38, 39 at the time. And it's like, this is not a closure. This is an opening, right? And it truly was. It truly was because, as my career progressed, I couldn't have stayed there. Like I couldn't have done a full career at this place. There was so much more out there, but you're working hard, you're digging, 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 and then you need something to prompt you to get out and see what else is out there. So yeah,
Jen, this is what I love about you saying that, because the second defining time in my life that you had a major impact on me, and I don't think I ever told you, was I hadn't seen you for a few years. COVID happened, and I hadn't seen you for a few years. And then randomly, I start going to this gym out in like far away because I'm like, I don't want to see anybody I know for a long time because I just sold some businesses and I just needed
yeah,
some downtime. And I walk in one day and I hear Nadine, and I look and it's you. And you were like, what are you doing here? I'm like, what are you doing here? I was like, I came here because I didn't think I'd see anybody I knew. And we just laughed and you gave me a big hug. And you didn't ask me for any details. You were just like, okay, I see that you've sold the businesses and here you are. And you said, because I told you I was taking some time off to
yeah,
just do nothing. I was very burnt out. And you said, put on this book. It's so silly.
Oh yeah.
You were like, go walk your dog all summer long and listen to Murder on Sex Island,
Yeah.
which I'm going to put a link to because
It
that
was
was a great
funny. Yeah.
recommendation. You were like, it's not going to make you think. It's just going to make you laugh. It's senseless. It's easy to digest. Be kind to yourself. Literally go for a walk and listen to
Yeah.
Murder on Sex Island. And I can't tell you, it seems like the silliest thing, but the defining thing about that was it wasn't, you weren't like, hey, what's your plan? What's the next step? Are you going to do this? You were just like, chill out, go walk.
Yeah.
And then after probably like a couple of months passed by and I finished the it's podcast, it's a book, but an audio book, I
No.
suppose, but she read it out on our podcast. And you said, be very kind to yourself as you're looking forward because there's going to come a time when you're going to get your energy back and you're going to feel like, what now? And you're like, it's going to be fine. It's going
Yeah.
to work out. But you're like, heads up, it's coming. And it did. And I remember it was like a weekend this winter. And I feel like I was like irritated with David. And I just kind of huffed up the stairs and I lay down on my bed. And I was like in my head thinking, what am I so mad about actually? And it was like, boom, I'm not mad. I have energy again
Yeah.
and I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling restless. Like I want to
Yes.
get back
Yep.
out there and create again. And I thought of you again.
Oh.
So, two big defining moments where you were just like a little lighthouse to me. So,
Oh.
thank you.
That's nice.
Ah,
That's nice to hear it. Yeah. I remember those days as well. I remember running into you.
well, it's only because through experience you learn, right? And anyway.
Well, I will
Okay,
say
so
so
yeah.
the I would say the three like blessings that came out of both of these events. One, in one of my in between jobs, I met one of my greatest friends, Kate, ever. Just random job, turn a corner, meet your friend. Two, when I went through the second termination, a friend of mine who I'd known because I had coached her daughter, she ended up, again, coming out of nowhere, barely knew me, but walked me through some really big events. Still to this day, I call her my fixer because, and, we become really good friends as well. But the third, friend benefit was that one of my really good friends went through a termination that was, mine times 10. And I felt really lucky to be able to walk her through that with that lived experience. And it was like I was, yeah, those sort of friend issues are the things that I think, the best things to come out of it. So the second firing, so after I got the job after a year, I tried to work in the government a few times and I just couldn't. It just was not me. So anyways, there was a job at an organization in Ottawa, an organization that I had known for a long time, a really, really cool dynamics in terms of law and, really interesting things. I had heard many people tell me, never go work at this place, right? It's a terrible place to work. It's dangerous, all the things. And I was like, but I really I can do this. I'm smart. I can work with people. And, I was always looking for that same comfort of that first job. So I decided to go work at this place. And I can tell you from the day I walked into it, I remember my husband's friend worked at this organization. And I remember the first 2 days, I went to go meet him. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he goes, okay, before you even start working here, I got to walk you through something. And he had a picture of the org chart. And he said, there's two camps in this organization, Camp A and Camp B. I'm going to highlight all the names who are on Camp A with yellow and all the names in Camp B in blue. And I was like, what?
This sounds disgusting.
It was disgusting. And so I had that yellow and blue highlighted org chart in my office. And I remember like people would call me and I would literally be like, okay, oh, which camp is this person on? Anyways, I should have known at that point. So I worked there for 4 years, and everything about it was just did not fit, except for there were a number of people that I met there that were also struggling under this very difficult, very, very difficult workplace, who were incredible. So you'd meet these people, you'd see them you'd see them in a meeting and they didn't have a word to say because they were so afraid. But then when you get them one on one, they were just these amazing, amazing people. So I
What were
was
they afraid of? Getting fired?
just the weirdness and this issue of the camps really was everywhere. It was, two senior people who were both vying for the top job. One ended up getting it. The other one didn't get it, but still had his people who were very, loyal to that side. And this was hundreds of years in the making. Like this is
Gross. Sounds
the,
like Succession, which I really loved watching, but would
but
never want to work
yeah,
there.
yeah. And it was really hard. So long story short, so 3 years into my job, there was a senior person, a woman, and this woman had a very I had heard many stories about her not liking other women. But I who's not going to like me? I can I know I can work through this. Anyways, one day I heard from a colleague that this woman had made up this awful, awful lie about me. Yeah, an awful lie that was like damaging, incredibly damaging to me personally, professionally, and I was angry. I was really angry. And it was a lie. And I it was kind of the first time in my life that like somebody was spreading something that there was no legs to it. And it had a really visceral effect. So I came home when I heard this lie, and I remember telling my husband about it. And I said, I'm not going to let this happen. So I demanded a meeting the next day with her boss and her. And I sat in a meeting, and Chris drove me there that day and then and sat outside. And I just said, this is not on. Like this is going to stop here. It was embarrassing and it was awful, but I was like, you are not going to do this to me. And I remember, Chris drove me home, and I remember the date was April the 8th. And I remember going and writing in my Outlook calendar for the next year, April 8th of the subsequent year. I wrote a little note to myself, and it was like, congratulations, you made it 1 year from your like worst event of your, this awful, awful event. Anyways, flash forward, April 7th, April
The
7th,
following year?
the following year, I get called into a meeting by somebody at the same level as me. And he called me into a meeting and said, listen, the boss wants you to leave. So basically, we can either do this the easy way or the hard way. And I was so shocked. I was so shocked. And I was like, neither of those ways sound easy to me. So left that meeting again, it's shock. But I decided at that point that I was going to make them force me out. I was not going to, like, there was no reason for me to get terminated other than these weird political stuff. So I kept going to work for 3, 4 weeks every
No,
day.
you
I
didn't.
did.
I'm
I did.
dying.
I did.
You were like, okay, so when he said you can go the easy way or the hard way, were you like, hard way? See
I
you
was
tomorrow?
I well, it was tough for me because I knew, like, this is my bread and butter, like how you're supposed to terminate people, by the book. I knew that it was just so wrong on so many levels. And
Yeah.
so I just was like, I am going to show up until you knock me out of here. And I remember I would be in meetings, like group meetings, and this person who'd been tasked with giving me this little piece of information, he'd be there and he'd be like trying to catch my attention, like we are going to continue this conversation. And I was like, nope, nope. And I had a really big thing that I was working on, a big project, and I was like, I am not I didn't want to let that project slip and then that be the reason why that they were terminating me. So I was like, nth degree, like that was probably the best production that I'd ever done because I was like, I just wanted to show you. And then eventually at 3 weeks, I kept going in every day until they handed me a piece of paper. And so it was a different, that was a different vibe. So I'd seen it coming my second day on at work, right?
Yeah, right.
I knew that this was place was like that. I'd had so much fair warning. Um, and I made, I'd seen it coming. So it was different. So for this time, so there was no, I didn't have to announce it to anybody. People had known that I was in a rough spot. So did the
What do you
same,
mean by that? You didn't have to announce it to anybody? Like your
like
friends
I,
and family?
yeah, I think as much as I'm sure I told them like this, yeah, yeah, as advertised, this place it was not a good place for me to be.
Right.
And I tried and it didn't work out. And so it was a less of a it was a less of an identity thing. One of the things absolutely I negotiated again was negotiated to go back to that same outplacement place, but this time it was a different vibe. So I went to the outplacement, and instead of like having to go to those structured, build your resume stuff, I knew that they had resources of all the sort of personality tests,
Ah, cool.
like more, really more holistic type of approaches. And I was like, yeah, that's the bundle I want this time. I don't need to fake that I'm going to work anymore. I just want to maximize so that I'm in a better place. And you know, the other thing that I was super proud of myself for doing. So the day that I got told, you can choose the hard way or the easy way, I'd gone out and I'd had these photos from work of different people and like different, just photos I'd taken over the years. And had these cards made up at Snapfish or whatever. And I had like, they were thank you cards, but they were specific to the organization. And I ordered 50 of them. So in that last 3 weeks of me working there, I wrote to 50 people in the organization, and I had that list. I probably could have written 75 because there were so many individuals that really did have a positive impact to me. And so I had the stack and of 50 envelopes. And on the day that I got delivered the letter, I threw them into the internal mail, right? So that, whenever my announcement was coming out, all of these people around the organization that I really cared about and had really, done awesome things for me were receiving these letters. And it was kind of like, yeah, and I'm going to use your internal mail system as well to spread good news. And and so it was, yeah, and it was also again like similar to writing things out. It was therapeutic because it was like I was not just remembering how awful it was. It was all these individuals. And I heard a lot, it was I think I was sort of struck from the first time where I hadn't heard from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure that those people that I did want to hear from, I would at least have that communication for me. And then people
Oh,
told me afterwards that, once the announcement went out that I was gone or whatever, it was sort of like a thing of pride because they had my little Snapfish cards and they put it on their
right.
bulletin board. And then somebody else who got it, but nobody really knew who had got one. But they were like, oh, you got one as well. And that made me feel really, 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 really good because it was tough. If it was tough for me, there's no doubt that everybody else there was not surviving.
Yeah, it
So
didn't seem like an organization where you'd thrive by any means.
was
So, in those 3 weeks, you knew a letter was coming. You were just like, I'm going to work and I'm going to put out excellent work until I get that official
yeah,
letter.
yeah,
But were you ever like sitting in meetings? Were you ever like, does everybody in this meeting know I'm kind of fired, but I'm still here? Like,
yeah.
did that cross
They
your mind?
yeah, they probably did all know. They probably did. And just the way that gossip flew and whatever. But I knew it was a bad decision. I knew it wasn't me.
Mm.
I will say that I went through a phase at the time, and it was, because it was so uncomfortable for those 3 weeks. I was like kicking myself saying, like, why Jennifer, why can't you be the type of person who just goes with the flow, right? Why? Because I did, for sure, this woman and I who did not like me, I wouldn't say I countered her, but I wasn't afraid to speak up to her. But then when you're in that misery, you're like, "Ugh, why can't you just be the person?" And all these people would come to mind that you believe would just have sat and taken it, right?
Right.
Would have. Why can't you be that person? And then you would still be having a job or whatnot. Why do you have to be, not, not that I, like, why do you have to stand up? Why do you have to stand up? And that was, I would say that was fairly short lived after I got let go totally out of the blue. I had three women who had also been let go. Same organization, same person, same set of facts, same rumors, and that made me feel really good. All really, go get them type of people. So, you know,
Mm.
but again, you go through this thing where you're like, why do I have to say what's on my mind? Why can't I
Yeah, the
just be?
bargaining, like if I just did this, if I just did this.
Yeah,
But I mean, let's be honest. Looking back, do you think that was a happy Jennifer, a thriving Jennifer, working really well at that organization?
for sure it wasn't. For sure it
Right.
wasn't. But, I really believed oh, I won't get dragged into that. I know about it, so I won't get sucked into it. And then all of a sudden you're sucked into it and you're like, how did this?
Yeah,
And
like why do you think we stay in those things?
I don't know, because I feel like you almost want to prove a point that you're above it. But it's
Ah,
so impossible because you get sucked in like everybody. And
mhm,
the being in that scenario where the ground is shifting, you're not your best self. You're not that person making great decisions because you're so unstable, right?
mhm,
And so you're not your best self. So maybe your best self could tackle it, but because of the
mhm.
instability, you're not firing on all cylinders.
Or
And
maybe your best self would have been like, get out of here on day three. Or,
Brett's right.
all those little, we all have those little moments when we're talking to ourselves. Like something's alerting you to something and you can block that out for a long time until you're on that unsteady ground and something happens. Either you're terminated or you break your ankle in front of a group of
Yeah.
humans while you're
Yeah.
teaching a class and you have to face some stuff, right? But if you look back, there's always a little whisper. But I think there's something to your point of proving a point or the potential to be able to do it, or there's something that
Yeah.
it's like it's almost too tempting not to try, and then you go
Yeah.
through, I don't know,
I can,
years and you're like,
yeah.
fuck, why couldn't I have been the person to like have
Oh
walked
yeah.
away from that? Or yeah.
100%. Like it's 100% like a marriage or a relationship where
Mm,
you're like, not, I can change this or I'm going to deny the truth because I'm above it or whatnot. And yeah, but it becomes so big that you can't capture it and you don't have control. Yeah.
so when you went home after the second one, it was very different from the first one.
It was very different. And what's kind of funny, yeah, because we'd known it was coming, right? So, but it's funny because the day that I got my letter, my kids told me the other day that they remember that we were going to a Sens game that night, and I wouldn't stop crying. And I don't even remember. I kind of remember going to the Sens game, or kind of remember like, business as usual. Let's just keep moving here. But then they knew it had happened. I don't know who told them, but then it became, yeah, but that part was just, looking back on it now, like that's just part of my story. Like
Yeah.
it's just the route I'd taken. And at the time, it was debilitating. And it was like how, you go through something like that and you wake up the next morning and you're like, how is everybody not stopped in their tracks seeing what an injustice this is, right? Because you think it's an injustice and you're like, how are these people just continuing on and going and getting Starbucks when my world
Mm-hmm.
just fell out? How come nobody's like fighting for me? And then,
Yes.
you're like, oh, okay, because it is, as your parents told you, you're going to get through it. But you're sort of in disbelief that the world's keeping on spinning, even though this has just happened to you. So,
For sure. And especially if there's people at like your first office that didn't reach out, that is jarring to it's jarring to realize that people are very caught up in their own world. And it's also a gift because I think when we're younger, we spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think of us. And then we get older and we're like, oh, they're not actually. Like they're just trying to get through their own
yeah,
termination or their own whatever in the world. And I mean, it is sad that no one reached out. I'm not making an excuse there because that
yeah,
was a miss for sure. You're an incredible human and they missed out. But you start to realize the world is still spinning because people are still they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to get through their own stuff. Like everyone has stuff, which is why it's so important to talk about it. Because here's the other thing people don't talk about: getting fired.
yeah,
Right? It's like, can we wash over that period? It's like, no, that's so interesting because that makes you who you are.
yeah, for sure.
And it's who you are. That's why you got fired because you couldn't not stand up for something. You couldn't
Yeah,
not challenge somebody when it was the right time to challenge somebody. I don't want to know a Jen White who doesn't do that.
yeah.
Boo.
I wanted to show you this book. So this is the book. So it sits on my bedside table. This is a book I bought. I was looking at it today. It's published in 2004 or something. But when the first time happened, like this was my only resource, right? Like because I didn't know anybody who'd been through it, and I obviously went to chapters or whatever and got this book, which by the way, funnily enough, is endorsed by none other than DJ Trump.
Okay, I
Yes,
won't
of
put a
course it
link.
is.
I won't put a
No,
link. I
no, 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 no.
can't.
It was a terrible book, but
It was, but
it
it's still on your nightstand.
well, well, I do it, but I keep it on my nightstand to remember where I was, right? But
Hmm.
it was, it's all these stories like Muhammad Ali, Michael Bloomberg, you know, Larry King, Bernie Marcus, all these big wigs. But I was just so craving for a story of somebody, a young person that went through that. This is why I said I wanted to come and talk about this because I didn't have anybody with the same set of facts. And like everybody can talk about these bigwigs, but I wanted like the human, I wanted somebody to walk me through those first few weeks. And I will say now with Reddit or stuff on the internet, I'm sure that there's lots more stories and blogs and stuff that people would find. But back then, like it was isolating. I didn't know anybody that had been fired because the company didn't want them anymore. And so yeah, that was part of my want to kind of tell that story.
There's a sense that we need to have an elevator pitch for things. Like,
Yeah,
why are you at that company anymore? Elevator pitch. Why'd you sell this company? Elevator pitch. Why are you, I don't know,
yeah,
whatever. And I remember after I'd sold the businesses and I was taking time off, I was like, Nadine, you just need to do nothing for three
yeah,
months. Actually, that came from my therapist. LOL, as if I could decide that myself. And she like really made me do a contract with her to do nothing for 3 months, like to really stop. And I went to a show. It was she's a German comedian. She's hilarious. She does impersonations of her mom and stuff. She's hilarious. Anyway, I'm there to see the show. And at the beginning, it's like an interactive kind of show. And she is picking someone out of the audience. And then the first question is, what do you do for a living? And my whole body
yeah,
was in a full body sweat. And I didn't tell the people I was with because I didn't want to admit it. But I was like, how do I explain this? I just stutter over, I'm really burnt
yeah,
out because I had a really jarring experience. Like, and I remember being so shocked that I was so shocked
yeah,
that I was reacting that way. And yeah, I can imagine what it's like to run into your neighbor who has heard you talk about this job you love. Same as my neighbors who heard me talk about me
yeah,
loving what I was doing. And all of a sudden they're like, why aren't you doing that? Anyway, we don't need an elevator pitch. Fuck an elevator pitch. It's just sometimes you can just say, I'm in transition.
yeah,
Or didn't work out, did it?
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's just so humanizing. It's so real. It's so vulnerable. And then that person can be vulnerable back. They don't need an elevator pitch either.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And it really, like literally, it did not come up at the time. And for all the anxiety that I had, same as you, like going to a show and being, put on the spot for it, it really didn't happen very often. if
No.
any time.
So, how long were you off the second time after this
So the
happened?
second time I went to that outplacement, I did all the MBT or the character analysis type of stuff, and was not off for very long. I ended up going back to, I just got a short-term contract with the government until I got my feet stabilized. And I'd always wanted to start my own business. So many, many years ago, when I was 25, I remember meeting a woman who had retired from the public service, and she had her own business as a mediator. And whenever I would think about in the dark days, I'd be like, well, whose life would you want? And it was very slim. It would, like, the number of people where I was like, hey, literally, would I trade my awesome husband, 3 kids for anybody? Probably the answer was zero. But in terms of career, I'd met this woman, and she was just this very empathetic, had a long work history, but was doing a job that she really liked, was picking and choosing the type of work she wanted to do. And so she's the person that I was like, that's what I want. And she would have been, I would say, early 50s when I met her. And she just, to me, she just seemed very happy. So after this short stint, I decided that I wanted to start a workplace investigations business. So that's what I do now. So I do investigations, which is, sort of tangent from being a lawyer. So I'm what they call a third party investigator. So if an organization gets an allegation of harassment or sexual harassment or that type of thing, they bring in an impartial third party investigator to conduct an investigation and to make findings of fact. And then I determine whether or not there's been violation of policy. So, and it suits my personality 100% because you're not embedded in an organization. You are, you're going in, you're doing this short-term investigation. You get to talk to really interesting people, really interesting, people in really tough situations. And then I get to make a determination about what I, based on my own pure judgment, think happened. And so so I knew I wanted to get into that field. So I worked for a short time for a firm who does this, sort of the best law firm in Canada doing it. I worked with them for a little bit and then ventured out on my own. So 10 years ago, or I guess 9 years now, I started my own company doing workplace investigations. And then from then, I'd always, as we started with, like, I love sport. I always loved sport. I always wanted to be like a sports agent, work in sport. And so when I started my own company, I knew that there was this gap in the same sort of formal third party investigations that we were doing in workplaces. There was nothing on the sport side. So I started my own firm doing sport investigations. And so now I have 5 lawyers who I work with, and we do all sport investigations. So when something happens in sport and they want to bring somebody in, they bring us in. And so, but a couple of things about that, like, I don't like my experience of, getting fired on a Tuesday, as well as working in that environment where it was so unstable you could barely function, right?
Hmm.
100%, like, that has paid off in dividends in the work that I do, right? Because I'm dealing with many similar situations. I understand that
Right.
weirdness with a boss. So that gives me, I think, a pretty unique lens. When people are telling me these awful stories about the workplace, I get it, right? And then the sport part, I feel really, really lucky to be in that field because it was my favorite course in law school, but there was no way at that point to get into sports law. So now I've found this sort of roundabout way to get into it. And I love it. I deal with young people, I deal with young athletes, high performance athletes, as well as just young people. And I could not imagine being in another spot, like working within an organization, which is what I would have done, or working as a lawyer. Being an investigator, it takes all my skill sets, and I can work as much as I want or as little as I want. Like any small business, it comes in ebbs and flows. you're always balancing, do I take on another file? Do I have time? And then all of a sudden you're slammed. And then 2 weeks later, you're stressed because you don't have work. But I really, really enjoy that. And
Do,
yeah,
do you
sorry.
think that going through those two experiences of the termination and how they happened made you even more determined to get into investigations? Because there's a part of you that's probably investigated those experiences that you had a million times over in your head. And now you actually get to show up for other people and do what you wanted to do for
Yeah.
yourself back
So
then.
yes and no. So being an investigator, like I cannot side with anybody, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
can't be over empathetic with somebody who's been through his experiences. And I'm always very clear there. But I think I have a good lens on on shit hitting the fan and understanding. I see a lot of high performing women in similar situations and they're embarrassed, they're I didn't sign up for this type of thing. And that part of it, I think, because I can be empathetic with them, I can help them explain their story a little bit better. I am truly in the middle, right? So, and I don't make any determinations. And sometimes, sometimes I think, yeah, you know what? You deserve to lose your job over this or whatnot, or you deserve to be reprimanded for this because usually people are still within the organization. So I don't feel like I'm always on one side or the other. But I think, I never would have had those lenses of private sector, public sector, understanding, one of the companies that I worked with was all about profit share. So understanding the dynamics around profit sharing business, all those little aspects that if I'd stayed at that one job, gosh, my world would have been so small, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
now I've had exposure to so many different workplaces. And I think that part of it makes me a good investigator. And when I started out with my own business, so I was 45 then, and I remember about a year in, I said to my husband, God, I wish I'd started my own business when I was 25 or 35.
Hmm.
And then, but the thing is, I I couldn't have been able to, like, I wouldn't have had that insight. I wouldn't have had
Yeah.
that confidence. I wouldn't have had that anything. So me hitting it and starting the business at 45 was actually perfect. Like it was,
Perfect. You hit
yeah,
your stride.
yeah,
I said the same thing to David. Because I'm loving coaching and doing some team development work, and I'm loving it. And I did it before, but now that I'm making it my whole career, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I'd started this earlier. And he said, I don't think you would have been so good at it
I
until
know.
now because you need experience to coach. You need experience to get in there and dig through what's happening with a team and help them come to see themselves and their team and each other and how they're showing up. And he said, you're only here now and you're only good at this now because of everything you've done. And I'm like, right. And it was a real gift because in the moment I was having a real like, oh, why didn't, like,
Yeah,
those moments when you're like,
exactly.
it's too late because I thought maybe it's too late because that's such an imperative thing because I think people don't start things because they think it's too late.
Yeah.
So when you look back, what was the hardest thing about all of it as one experience, summing it up as a whole?
Uh, I think it was feeling like I'd lost control, like feeling or feeling like I had let other people control my career. And I'd let it happen. I hadn't, but I feel like that was you know, I I was on a path that I'd let other people have influence on it. That's what it felt like. So thinking that I had relinquished control to people who really in the end of the day don't matter to me, right? And they had put me into a state of misery from the first one when I was at home, and a state of misery for the second one when I was working amongst it. And so I think that was the hardest thing because yeah, I like to think that I'm the master of my own ship.
I mean, we are just sometimes it has to get pushed a certain direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think accepting that um no matter what, like, even though these people didn't mean anything to me and don't mean anything to me now, I used to daydream about running into those people, right? Like, and what I would say if I ran into them at Costco or Canadian Tire. I'd always try and think of like, what's the, if I just had like 7 words or something to say, what would I say? Um, and that those feelings still seep into me because I feel like I want to send the message that you tried, but here I am. I'm still killing it.
I mean, I think you've sent that message because look at you.
Y- Well,
You're thriving.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you love what you do. You weathered some storms, and not only weathered some storms, but you used that to push you into what you're currently doing. I mean, that's the biggest gift, right? The biggest gift isn't running into someone and having the exact thing that you want to say and getting to say it at the exact time. It's my biggest gift is like, I don't even think of these people. Like, that's a gift. I get to get up in the morning, walk my dog, and then I get to go do work that I really like doing. Like that's the win. Like you win, you won.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And but yeah, yeah, and you have to get to, yeah, you have to get to that stage. Whereas when
Yes, yeah,
when you're when you're being beaten down and you're full of that self-doubt, you don't feel like you can. But it's, yeah, it's 100% the message, my girls are going through school and deciding things and friends and those types of issues, and I'm watching myself coach through, and I keep saying, oh, don't make the same mistakes that I made. But then I sort of think, but you got to make those mistakes, or you have to, because you don't, if you, yeah, that's obviously how you grow and you get into the broader
yeah.
world. Yeah.
It's hard. You have to see people that you love dearly go through really difficult, challenging times, and you can't show them the way. Well, number one, because you don't know, it's like their own path. But number two, you got to build those muscles yourself. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
But then you come out and you are changed in a really beautiful way, and you get to do something really cool with it.
Yeah.
Or you don't. I mean, unfortunately, some people get really bitter, and yeah, not even that they get really bitter. There's times for bitterness for sure, but it takes work, I should say. It's not just like you go through a hard thing and then you're like, I'm stronger. It really does. It's continual work to keep moving forward. You know, like I remember I got divorced when I was 33 as a baby, and I said to mom, this is so difficult. And she was like, life's difficult. And I remember thinking that was the worst advice she'd ever given me. But it's not that she wasn't seeing me. She was just like, yeah, honey, life is difficult. Like you're gonna survive this. And she said the only way through it is through it, which I thought was the second worst piece of advice anybody had ever given me. But again, it was the best piece of advice because you just have to put your head down and get through it. And there is always something on the other
Yeah.
side. Plug for the name of the podcast. Jen, thanks for coming on and telling me your story.
That was
I really
awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, and again, like, it's all timing because for a long time, I don't think I was comfortable sharing the story, right? And it still hurt me in some way. But I think by the time you're ready to express it, you're like, yeah, that's just part of my fabric, and no big deal.
The Jen fabric. You're very lucky if you get to have a piece of the Jennifer White fabric. I'll tell you, world. You're a real dear of a human. I love you.
That's nice of you. That's nice. Thanks, Nadine. I'll be a number one
All
fan.
right.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to see all my. I have loved your podcasts,
Oh.
each one, and I especially loved when you cut with your mom. And what did she say? This is fucking intense.
Yeah.
I was, I was so glad you kept that in.
Oh, you can't censor Lorraine Hogan. She's good. All right. You have a
Okay.
beautiful day on this rainy Tuesday. No, it's not Tuesday.
Thursday.
Thursday. And I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully, I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Don't.